Your reading will start.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, this old deck's kind of strange.
Where did you find them?
It's an unspoken rule not to use somebody else's cards.
Who cares? Who's going first?
Follow one rule to stay out of danger.
Hello?
You're never to deal with a deck of stranger. The Hermit. Magician. And priestess for death. Whose face will you see?
When you take your last breath.
Who's next?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. This is Mike. Joining me, as always, it's Mr. Venom. What's up, Venom?
Greetings and salutations, wannabe astrologers. I'm doing. I want to say I'm doing okay, but I've got lots of shit going on. And we've already talked about it. So I'm not gonna bore the audience with it. Let's just say Mr. Venom's life's not going great, but it can only get better, right? Fingers crossed. How the hell you doing, Mike?
Well, I mean, I'm doing okay. Whether this movie contributed to that or if it's in spite of the movie, we'll figure that out soon. Also with us, it's Don and Ellie. What's up, Don?
Yeah, what's going on? Always happy to be here. Although I'm really starting to downplay that sentiment with Jason Blum's movies recently.
All right. Well, as I think we mentioned at the end of last episode, we are talking about the new theatrical release Tarot this week. Or in this episode, so we have a hour and 32-minute listed on ESPN, IMDb.com. It is rated PG-13.
On tap, Mike.
Oh. Yeah. When a group of friends recklessly violates the sacred rule of tarot readings, I guess that's a sacred rule, they unknowingly unleash an unspeakable evil trapped within the cursed cards. One by one, they come face to face with fate and end up in a race against death. It almost sounds like a plot to a Final Destination, minus the tarot part. But anyways, general thoughts. We'll start out with Venom. What did you think of Tarot?
All right, folks. Well, you guys know that I don't watch trailers, but if you've seen this trailer, and I'm sure many of you have, the trailer kind of makes this movie look like pretty fucking generic and maybe not very compelling. Well, guess what? You get exactly what's advertised, because this movie was fucking stupid. There are so many problems with this movie, between the bad writing, the bad dialogue, the boring kills, just terrible decision making throughout. This movie suffers from all the same, bad horror tropes that we've seen in the past. It's filled with jump scares that aren't effective. It's filled with characters that are idiotic. And yes, I know they're college kids, so maybe we're supposed to give them some concessions since they're young and stupid. But yeah, no, I really can't. This is just a derivative and pedantic storyline that really adds nothing to the genre. If you've ever seen a cursed tarot deck movie before, it's probably better than this one. The one thing that the couple of things that this movie has going for it is that it does come from a larger studio. So, I mean, it has a slightly better budget than, say, your average independent movie. So the effects look decent. The creatures are decent looking. When I say effects, I'm not talking about kills. I'm talking about the effects involving the creatures, because like I said, the kills are pretty boring. Most of them are off screen. Even the ones that are on screen are still pretty dull and uninspired. The main villain in this movie is, just your basic person looking for revenge because they were wronged in their life. It's a story that we've seen before. The ending is pretty goddamn stupid because it doesn't make sense when not to say that I'm an expert on real life tarot reading by any stretch, but my wife used to actually, believe it or not, Mrs. Venom actually was into tarot cards and tarot card reading for a long time. This movie tends to kind of break, and they even talk about one of the rules in particular that they break in this movie, but then there's other rules to tarot readings that they break that just make this just really, really dumb all around. All I can really say is that, this movie is just another of the Blumhouse style movies that have come out, jump scare factories. Whereas something like Night Swim that came out at the beginning of the year was just dull and boring. This one maybe isn't dull so much as it's just generic. It's just so generic with its creatures and its storytelling and its kills, and this movie offers nothing new to the horror genre. So ultimately, if you're looking for something new and innovative, Tarot is not it. This movie isn't even fun. Like, movies like this should at least be fun in the situation of, like, maybe you got some friends over on a Friday or Saturday night, you're looking for a horror movie to throw on so that you can all drink and have a good jump scare filled time. This movie isn't even that. Like, this is the movie that you and your friends would just fall asleep while watching. Like, it's just so, God forbid you have alcohol involved. Yeah, you're all going to fall asleep. This is, if any, I heard a reviewer say that this is the movie that gets auto played after you watch the real movie that you wanted to watch on like a streaming service, and that's a pretty good description, because this would be that kind of movie where you're just like, why is it suggesting this to me? Just because it's a horror movie, and then you're halfway through it and it's like, this is just stupid, I'm gonna stop. And ultimately, this is a movie that I would have stopped watching if I didn't have to review it for the show. So ultimately, folks, there's nothing really original here, nothing worth seeing. This is absolutely not going to get any kind of recommendation from me. I'm not going to say it's the worst movie I've seen this year, because it's objectively not the worst film I've seen, but it is one of the worst films that I had to go to the theater to watch, sadly. So I'll just leave it at that. If you're a 15-year-old horror fan looking to kill 2 hours on a Saturday, then this might be a movie for you. But if you're a seasoned horror fan that's sick of the tropes, sick of the bad dialogue, sick of the bad performances, then this is just a movie to avoid. Just flat out avoid it. There are still way better horror films playing in theaters right now to get your horror dollars. So, like I said, I can't recommend this movie at all. I can't even recommend it to stream once it hits streaming services. So let's just say Tarot is a very forgettable jump scare factory, and I really, really look forward to about an hour to an hour and 20 minutes from now when I no longer have to talk about this movie ever again. And I'll leave it at that for now.
All right. So Venom liked it. Let's go, John.
Yeah, I will start off with this. Earlier this week, Godzilla Minus One arrived on streaming services. Do yourself and the world a favor and watch that movie, and you'll actually find something enjoyable and entertaining for 2 hours instead of this hour and a half piece of dog shit. Oh, God. And yeah, where do I start with this? I will probably echo a lot of Venom's critiques. This is stupid, insulting, generic, PG-13 Blumhouse dog shit. I will probably add I don't know how accurate it is because it's been a while, but I do remember one of my old girlfriends, she was really into astrology. And a lot of what she was saying is contradicted by this. So I don't really know which one's right. And for the sake of my dick being wet, I'm going to go with my girlfriend on this and say that a lot of what went on in here is made up hokum. Now, I don't have the specifics because I've only watched the movie once, and I don't have a great deal of knowledge on it, but I do know that a lot of the various interactions that went on in here are tweaked for the sake of trying to make a horror movie. And I don't know if that's the right way to go about making this kind of a movie. From what I remember talking with her about it, there were some aspects of it that you could turn into a movie, into a genuine genre fair, if you not necessarily tweaked it, but just let it play out. And again, I don't have the specifics because it's been a few years, and I really didn't care that much about it. I was more concerned with other aspects of the relationship. But from what I do remember, there were a lot of contradictions and rules from what she said versus what went on in here. And it's not as though that, you know, they're all that interesting or they make the movie all that good. They just make the movie feel stupid. And I don't want to, you know, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give anything away. You know, it's not that spoiler section, but there's just so many times in this where you're just rolling your eyes at what's going on, and it just makes the movie feel like a drag. And I think that's the part where Venom is saying about it not being fun. And I you know, I'm not going to speak for him, but for me, it was just a lot of it just came off as just insultingly stupid, and I can't get behind those kinds of movies. And then you just wrap it all up with PG-13 nonsense, like just irritating college characters, no on-screen kills. I mean, if you're complimenting the fact that the creature looks good as like a saving grace for this movie, which I'm going to admit, you know, the main creature that gets released in here doesn't look that bad. You know, the design's all right. Maybe a little too CGI gloss on it, but I can live with that for the kind of film that it is. But I mean, if we're pulling at straws to try to find something like that to say is redeeming about this movie, then come on, guys, we're better than this. I mean, as genre fans, you know, we watch hundreds of movies a year, and I think we can all recommend movies that would probably be better served going to theaters than, you know, just generic tripe like this. Yeah, I mean, you know, how the hell did something like this escape the, you know, whatchamacallit, the focus group stuff? I mean, you know, I can't even say that this is a focus group horror film because I think they would probably be bored to tears with something like this. It's just so bland. It's, you know, jump scare after jump scare after jump scare, and then by the fifth time you can't even give a crap anymore because it's the same thing every time out. You know, something spooky happens behind a character's back, or something lunges out of the darkness and, oh, whoops, false scare, but then, oh wait, the second time around it's the real thing. It just becomes tiring. And I mean, like I said, there's just so many issues compounding it. Yeah, the studio gloss does, you know, make it look better than what it should be. But I mean, if we're, you know, pulling at straws trying to find something redeeming, then the film's probably not worth it. You know, like if you can't say something about it that, you know, you would really say, wow, that scene was really well done, or, you know, I really like the way that, you know, these, you know, final few minutes came together, and, you know, the movie ended on a high note. So, you know, at least, like, you know, the first 80 minutes were kind of a drag, but then, like, you know, pulled itself together and it came out, you know, you feel good at the end of it. Like, I mean, we're not even getting stuff like that here. I mean, the whole thing is just a drag. You know, a lot of the rules are broken in here, and you know, again, I can't confirm anything just because it's, you know, been a while, but the story is just stupid, and, you know, rules are broken for the sake of trying to make a movie, and it's just not even a good time. Yeah, there's very little here. Again, it's not objectively the worst movie I've seen all year, but, and I mean, bottom five is a definite. Well, maybe not, but I'll just be fair and say bottom 10, and we'll just leave it at that. So yeah, I'm really starting to find Bloom's name is not worth the weight it's printed on anymore, and it's really going to take much for me to really, you know, I'll still watch his stuff, but it's really going to take a lot for me to get back into saying his name is, you know, god tier quality genre fare again. So, you know, the sake of saying anything, and you know, again, I've only seen it once, so I don't have a lot of the details accurate. So I'll just leave it at that and say back to you, Mike.
All right. Well, You guys are not gonna get any disagreement out of me on this one. Yeah, it was pretty lame. Um, I I don't have a lot of new stuff to say that hasn't already been said. I will say, like, when it comes to jump scares, I'm fine with them, but this movie really handholds you like towards every jump scare, almost as if like because it's PG-13, they want to like let the audience know every time, because every situation that's set up for a jump scare, it's just so paint by numbers, like, oh, lights go out, or here comes your musical big scare cue. Things are just so set up to where you're already bracing for it. I remember the trailer. I don't remember much about the trailer except when I saw it, it didn't seem like it would be that much. But uh, you're still gonna give it a chance. But this definitely looks like the lackluster trailer, and yeah, that's kind of what we're starting to learn from Blumhouse is like, yes, once in a while that they put out a worthwhile movie, but this type of movie or this brand of movie, while not always as bad or as lame as Tarot, this tends to be like a common occurrence with them. Just assembly line, no frills, everything you expect, nothing more. A type of horror film, and man, yeah, I felt like there was a few scenarios that were set up decent, and if the kills themselves would have been better, then there'd be a little redemption. But there's just so many of that the kills that are just set up with like an evil stare or a scream from an entity, and then like edit to like character. It's just very lame. Not much merit to anything in this movie. So I would say, yeah, unless you're like a horror completist, you can. I wouldn't even say, yeah, watch it the day it hits streaming. You can probably just put it on the back burner, unless you're on a mission to watch every single release possible. Other than that, this is a big ol' skip. Considering we've had a lot of, I think Venom already alluded to this. We've had quite a bit of theatrical horror and just other movies, even not in the genre, like kind of tweener movies where like maybe there's a little bit of horror elements in them. A lot of that stuff out right now. All of them are probably a better option than this one. So go take advantage of those, and yeah, send the message to Blumhouse that they can stop putting these ones out, please. So I'll leave my general thoughts there for the moment. Back to you.
I mean, yeah, I don't know what else I could possibly add to this thing. Bad characters. I wanted to kind of mention a point that Don talked about, that how I felt like this movie was like a pre-focus group movie. You know how they'll finish a movie, they'll have a first draft, and then they'll have a focus group come in and watch the movie and give their feedback and everything else. Yeah, this movie feels like it's the focus group showing. Like this was just their first draft and they just decided, fuck it, this is good enough, no need for a focus group. Because I can't imagine that they would have had a focus group of actual adult horror fans watch this and say, oh yeah, it doesn't need any changes at all. No, this movie needed a lot of changes, god damn it. We talk about studio interference in movies, and it's like, yeah, this movie needed a lot more interference to make it somewhat watchable. This was barely watchable for me. I mean, yes, it's a polished movie. It looks nice. It's got some decent cinematography. Like I said, some of the creatures look pretty decent. They're all seen in the dark for the most part, so it's not like you're even getting them in their full glory necessarily. And then I would say probably two of the kills to me were maybe entertaining. Not gory or bloody or over the top, just the way that they were presented I thought was kind of cool and different. That's all. So, but that's really the only positive spin I can put on this movie. Maybe one or two entertaining kills and maybe some decent creature design. It is a little generic, mind you. Like none of the creatures are all that compelling. The fool looks like a harlequin, exactly what he's supposed to look like. The hermit looks like just some guy in a black robe holding a lantern. So they're not like the most thought out necessarily villains ever, but I mean they're effective. They look decent. Some of them aren't even CG. Like there's actually actors credited with playing the hermit, the devil, and the countess. So I'm assuming the Fool was full CG, and that makes sense because the Fool in the movie he was very thin and just looked like a Harlequin doll, really, more than anything. So, like I said, there's very little positives to even talk about with this movie. The walkthrough is going to be pretty quick and boring, ultimately, because I'm not going to go through every single horoscope and premonition and everything. I'll go over the basic story. You guys can decide if it's something that you want to check out later on. But aside from that, anything else you guys want to bring up before we get into this terrible walkthrough?
Yeah, as always, I'm just afraid of saying anything that's a spoiler, although I don't really give a shit at this point.
Yeah, no,
All right.
I'm good on general thoughts. I got something I'll add like at the beginning of the spoilers, but other than that, no.
All right, well, that's going to be your final spoiler warning, folks. I would say if you haven't seen Tarot, avoid it like the plague and just go ahead and stick with us here. We'll go over all the problems that this movie has. All right, this movie opens with a 20-minute cold open. I'm not fucking kidding, folks. 20 goddamn minutes before, and I checked my phone to make sure, and yes, it's accurate. It was like 18, 19 minutes before we actually got to the title card. So what does the movie open up with? Well, it opens.
I'll say this right now, Venom. When you watch one of the movies for the main show, you're going to be eating your words on that, and I will just leave it at that.
Awesome. All right, let's get into it. Our movie opens up with a bunch of douchebag college kids. I believe it's about 7 of them total. They are sitting around a fire. It looks like they're camping. They're even talking about how great it was to get out in the great outdoors. But then one of the kids is like, "Oh, what are you talking about? We rented a fucking mansion." And then the camera pans out and shows that they're just in the front yard of this big ass mansion that I can only assume they got on like Airbnb or Vrbo, one of those Airbnb type apps. So they're there. One of the kids, I believe his name was Lucas. We can go over some of the characters. They're not worth going over. They're fucking hollow characters that really mean nothing. We have Paige, who's kind of the hot chick in the group. We've got Madeline, who is one of the lesbian girls, I believe. We've got Paxton is actually Jacob Batalon. And for those of you who are Spider-Man fans, you know him as Spider-Man's guy in the chair, at the new Spider-Man, the MCU Spider-Man. So, yeah, it was good to see him. He was kind of a nice saving grace. Not to say that he saved the movie by any stretch of the imagination, but anytime I see him in a movie, I at least smile because I do like him. I like him in other stuff besides Spider-Man as well, but Spider-Man is probably going to be the thing that most people know him from. We have a character named Haley, who is kind of a wannabe astrologer herself and tarot card reader. We have Elise, who is the other lesbian girl. Her and the other lesbian are in a couple. They're in a relationship. We have Lucas, who is, the handsome rich white boy. We've got Grant, who is dating Haley. I guess they've been together for a little while. So those are our 7 friends. They eventually find out that they ran out of alcohol. Who the fuck rents an Airbnb for a whole weekend for 7 people and doesn't prepare by buying enough alcohol? That's their first mistake right there. Anyway, they run out of alcohol. They try to decide if they want to go out and get some more or maybe order some through DoorDash or something like that. But obviously the house, we find out that the house is kind of desolate. It's out in the sticks. There's not really a lot of places around there. They'd have to take like a couple of mile drive just to get into a town to, potentially buy some more alcohol. So they decide, since we're in a mansion, there's probably some booze in here somewhere. Mistake number 2. They decide to start searching the house looking for alcohol. And finally, Lucas, our rich white douchebag, finds a door that says private keep out, and it is locked. So what's the obvious thing you're going to do after you see that? Break the fucking door open, of course. I mean, what else would you do in that situation? So, of course, they break the door open, they get into the basement, and this is where it kind of turns into Cabin in the Woods, because they get down to the basement, and it's almost like a Warren Museum style of basement. You remember the Warrens from the Conjuring movie. They've got their museum of like cursed objects. Well, this house, this mansion has the same thing. Fucking,
It immediately made me think of the Shop and Friday the 13th series, because we're now doing that series. I was like, oh, the Cursed Collectible Shop. My two immediate thoughts were, my two immediate thoughts were Curious Goods, and then my other was like, oh no, if they start around picking out too many items and purposely focusing on them, are they really trying to make a metaverse out of this? Please God, no.
Exactly. That was a concern I had too. But then when I'm done with this walkthrough, I'm going to talk about what this movie should have done and how they could have created a little bit of a universe. But we'll get into that later. Anyway, so they're in the basement. They're looking around. They see all these objects. I don't know if they're cursed, but Haley, the girl who's actually into astrology, realizes that all the items in there are related to astrology. You know, they're all related to the stars, to predicting the future, horoscopes, things like that. Eventually, Paxton finds a box with tarot cards inside. Now, these are not just store-bought tarot cards. The box is very obviously hand-carved with a symbol of all 12 zodiacs on top, the zodiac wheel, I believe they called it. And then when you open the box and you looked at the tarot cards, the cards were all hand-drawn. They were not like mass manufactured on a printer or something. They were very obviously hand-drawn. They look cool, don't get me wrong, but they were still hand-drawn. So, in their infinite wisdom, what do they decide to do? Of course, let's all get our horoscopes read by Haley, who is, like I said, a kind of a wannabe astrologer / tarot card reader. And everybody's thinking, oh, it'll be fun, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, one or two of them, like Paxton and Grant, are both kind of like, I don't really want to do this. It seems silly. But then Haley talks about one of the major rules of tarot card reading. And that rule is never use another person's deck. If you are going to read someone's horoscope using tarot cards, the deck has to belong to you. So literally 2 seconds after she talks about this, she's like, fuck it. Let's just go ahead and do it. It'll be fun. All right, so I'm not going to go over every single person's prediction, but I'm going to go over the basic tarot reading, which is basically 13 cards are pulled from the tarot deck. 12 cards are put in a circle formation, almost like a clock. And each one of those cards represents a different aspect of their life. It might be their astrological sign. It might be, if they're patient or impatient, if they're pig-headed, things like that. And then the 13th card, the card in the middle of the circle, is their future card, basically what the future holds for them. So obviously each character in each of the 7 douchebags here in the house gets a different 13th card. Paxton gets the Fool. Paxton obviously is kind of like the fun-loving stoner of the group, so he, of course, gets the Fool. Let's see. Various other, like Haley, who does her own reading last, which I didn't even think was a thing. I didn't think tarot card readers could do their own reading. I thought that there was might be something against that or something, but apparently it's fine. Because another character later in the movie talks about how she could have read her own horoscope but didn't, but we'll get to that. Anyway, so Haley starts reading everybody's horoscope, and everybody's 13th card, their future, basically represents a different creepy character. We get the High Priestess, we get the Hermit, we get the Devil, we get the Magician, the Magician, we get the Death card, and I can't think of, the Hangman, and we get the Hanged Man as well. So like I said, everybody gets a different card. Now, after the reading is done, everybody leaves. We had a great time, and everybody goes home. Well, not home, but back to campus. I'm assuming all these kids kind of they either go to the same school or they're in the same general area. Maybe they go to adjacent schools or something like that. So anyway, at that point, it just becomes, let's pick people off. I mean, that's literally the rest of the movie. It's let's just start picking people off. The first person to get picked off is Elise, and she's actually the birthday girl. She's the reason that these kids all rented this Airbnb for the weekend, because it's Elise's birthday. So when Elise gets back to the dorms, she's the only one there. Everybody's still gone. She starts hearing noises. out in the hall just outside her room, her dorm room. She comes out of her dorm room. She sees that the attic stairs, the retractable ladder that you can use to go up to the attic, has been lowered. She goes ahead and puts it back up into place, closes the attic hatch, and goes back to her dorm room. A couple of minutes later, she hears another noise, comes back. The ladder is back down on the floor. But this time she's hearing like giggles. She's not little kid giggles, but like, college girls, like, people that she would be rooming with. So she starts to think that people are home. Long story short, she goes up to the attic. We get a jump scare and her card was the High Priestess. So we then get the High Priestess making an appearance. Obviously, she's a fucked up black witch, with a weird crown and long nails. And what ends up happening is she ends up using the ladder and crushing Elise's head. We don't see it, unfortunately. It is off screen. We see blood splash onto her cell phone, but we don't actually see the crushing blow. And then that's the end of that scene. The rest of the group get the news that Elise was killed. They deem it an accident. The police don't deem it a murder because it looks like she tried to climb up those stairs, fell down the stairs, hit her head on the ground, broke her neck, crushed her head, whatever you want to go with. So the police call it an accident. Obviously, Elise's girlfriend is freaking out because they literally were on the phone 30 seconds earlier. The girl Elise puts her phone down to go check the noise out in the hall and then literally dies. So that's the end of Elise. After this, our friends, they haven't really put 2 and 2 together yet because it's still just the first death. They're all concerned, for Elise's girlfriend who's been left behind, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, it's that night, and I think it's Lucas and Paige end up walking home. Lucas is walking Paige home. Lucas has almost like a little will they, won't they type situation. Like you could tell they're both into each other, but they haven't actually neither of them have made the first move yet. Lucas ends up dropping her off at her apartment, and then he goes to take the subway home. While in the subway, shit starts going crazy. The lights start flickering. Lights end up going off completely. And then we see the Hermit, which corresponds with Lucas's card. And the Hermit, as I said, is basically just a big guy with a black robe and a lamp, like a lantern. Lucas basically just continues running away from him until finally he thinks that he sees the Hermit in the train car with him that he's hiding in. He's in a part of the subway where there's subway cars kind of parked, but there are open tracks there that potentially maybe still getting used. Eventually, he like I said, he thinks that the Hermit is in the train car with him. He opens up the door, jumps out, doesn't see the oncoming train, which basically turns him into a bug splat on the windshield, and now Lucas is dead. Now, this kill really pissed me off because Lucas is the motherfucker that broke that door to go into the basement. If it wasn't for his dumb ass going through a door that very clearly said private keep out, none of this would be happening. But do I get to relish in Lucas' death? Do I get to see him maybe he should not have been an early kill, in my opinion. He should have been a later kill so that he could live with the knowledge that he did this shit to his friends, that he was the catalyst for all of this. But nope, he's our second victim. He gets taken out, squished by a train. Then finally the friends are interviewed by the police because now this close-knit group of friends have lost 2 friends in consecutive days. They start, talking about different theories. Paxton is a podcast listener, and they kind of make a couple of jokes about that in the movie with him listening to true crime podcasts. And he starts thinking that maybe one of them is the killer, that one of the friends is the killer, and this is some kind of murder mystery. Obviously, the friends squash that quickly, and they move on. So I actually forget who was next here, if it was the bridge scene or... Yeah, I think it was the bridge scene, right? I can't remember who was next. Yeah, this movie left such an impression on me, I can't even remember the order of our friends getting killed. Let's see. Let's just go with the bridge scene. So basically, our remaining 4 or 5 members of the group decide to try to find some expert on this, an expert on astrology, an expert on tarot card readings. They end up finding a woman online who actually has experience with this stuff, has written a couple of different books, has a very active website, and actually talks very specifically about things that have happened to them, like how tarot readings can pretty much induce fate. That it could potentially basically tell you exactly how you're going to die or if you're going to be successful, blah, 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 blah. While at her house, she asks them flat out, okay, did you find a box of tarot cards that were hand drawn and they were in a black wooden box with the zodiac wheel printed on top? And all the kids are like shocked because that's exactly what it was. We then find out, and oh, by the way, this character is played by Olwen Fourier, I think is how I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, but genre fans would know her from The Northman and from Mandy. Actually, she played the mother in Mandy, the mother from the cult group. So it's always good.
She's also Sally from the TCM Redux.
Yes, that's right. I knew her face was more familiar than that. You're right. She plays Sally in the 2022 Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. So again, a nice genre face to see in here. She starts telling backstory on the tarot deck, and this is where our exposition scene. This is where we get all our exposition. As it turns out, back in the 1700s, there was an astrologer, a woman who studied astrology, and mind you, this is the 1700s, so she's probably considered a witch. She's an astrologer, and she's hired by a rich count. That count has a young bride who is pregnant, and she's going to be giving birth very soon. This astrologer has been under the employ of this count for a while. She's been like his trusted sage, if you will, for predicting the future and things like that. But eventually he asks her to give a horoscope for the child, the unborn child. And this is where the astrologer realizes that both mother and child are going to die basically on the birthing table during childbirth. They're both going to die. The husband, the count, gets pissed at the astrologer and forces her to continue doing the reading over and over again, hoping that the cards will change and give a more positive future. Unfortunately, the cards never change, just like the stars never change. So every time she continues to do a reading for the mother and the unborn child, she gets the same result. They're going to die during childbirth. The count finally says fuck it and ends up banning the woman from the kingdom, from whatever the area that they're living in. It turns out the astrologer has a daughter, so the astrologer and her daughter leave willingly. They just, they're banished, so they leave. And what ends up happening? Exactly what the astrologer predicted. The mother and the unborn child both died during childbirth. The count ended up getting fucking pissed about it and started to accuse the astrologer of actually of utilizing witchcraft and actually doing this, actually being the catalyst for the death of the countess and her unborn child. So the count starts a hunting party and they start hunting down the astrologer. Unfortunately, they don't find the astrologer, but they do find her daughter. And they do end up killing her daughter, and they hang her up in the woods. The astrologer ends up finding her daughter and, of course, vowing revenge. And how does she vow revenge? She starts drawing up tarot cards. Yes, it turns out that this is the person who actually created these cards. She created the box. We see her actually carving the zodiac wheel into the box and then inscribing all of the cards. And then finally, when she's done with it, she puts the cards in the box. She puts the box in the center of this kind of carved out area on the floor, and she slits her own throat. She basically kills herself. She slits her own throat, falls down onto the symbol that she carved into the ground, and then we see her blood fill up all the crevices. Eventually, the blood kind of congregates at the box, which is in the center of the circle. We see the zodiac wheel start to glow, and that's pretty much the end of that. And what ends up happening is anyone who's read their horoscope with this particular deck, will meet their death based on their 13th card, their future card. So she ends up taking the deck post-death, mind you. Like she dies, she comes back, and then she starts doing horoscope readings for all of the different people that were involved in the murder of her daughter. All the people that were in the hunting party, the count, everyone at the house, at the count's house. Obviously not the countess. She's already dead. She died in childbirth. But basically, she starts reading all of their horoscopes. All the horoscopes start to come true. Now, this is something that I question about this, because based on information that I told, that I remember that I was told from Mrs. Venom back when she cared about tarot cards, you can't do someone's tarot horoscope reading without their permission. They have to be a willing participant. You can't just decide, oh, I'm going to do this person's horoscope reading, and they're not even there. Like, from what I understand, you can't do that.
I know nothing about tarot cards other than, like, the general concept, and even I found that kind of odd. Like, wait, you can just, like, randomly say, hey, I'm going to read this person's, like, tarot, even though they're not here and didn't agree. Like, that's weird.
Yeah, that's one of the big things that I found out. It's one of the things that I remember from my girlfriend was that, it's got to be a willing participant. You have to be, you have to be there to, you have to be there to do it. And it has to be willing and consensual.
Yep. See, good. We have confirmation. Awesome. Because the whole time I'm just like, you can't just do someone's horoscope without their permission. That seems crazy. But that's exactly what the astrologer does. She ends up doing the horoscope of all the people that wronged her, and they all end up meeting their death. They all end up meeting their doom. They all die, and the deck just kind of disappears into history. Then the woman, the expert, let's call her the expert, she starts talking about stories of the tarot deck popping up in different places. Like, she talks about, 1968, it appeared here, and 6 people mysteriously died, right after they used the deck. In 1977, the deck appeared in this city or this country, and 8 people mysteriously died. But then she gets to 1988, and she's like, in 1988, there was a group in London who found this deck of cards, and all of them died except for one. There was one survivor. Well, guess who the fucking survivor was, folks? Yes, it's the expert. She survived the 1988 tarot attack, if you will. And the reason that she survived, she did not do her own reading. She did a reading for all of her friends, and then that was it. Unfortunately, if you remember, Haley, our tarot card reader during the opening scene, did read her own horoscope. So she's just as cursed as everyone else is now. So at this point, we now have our backstory, as stupid as it is. We have our backstory, and basically the expert gives the kids the suggestion of destroying the deck. She says, if you know where the deck is now, go get it and destroy it. She doesn't say how. She just says the deck needs to be destroyed. The kids end up deciding, okay, fuck it. Let's go back to the house and see if we can find the tarot deck. They do end up finding the deck. Unfortunately, when they throw the deck and the box into the fire. Of course, horror trope number 1374, the cards don't burn and the box doesn't burn. They just sit there. Eventually, our expert shows up at the house, at the mansion, the Airbnb. I'm assuming one of the kids must have called her and told her where they were. I don't know. They don't show that in the movie. So, suspension of disbelief. So our expert shows up, realizes that the cards can't just be destroyed, or she gets into more explanation, which she should have done the first time, but for some reason, probably because she wanted to be in the movie for a second scene, decided not to give the kids all the information. What it actually turns out is that you need to separate the soul of the astrologer from the cards. When the astrologer killed herself, she attached her soul to these cards, cursing them forever. So what we see is the expert, she draws a zodiac wheel on the ground, puts the cards in the middle of the circle, and then she gets in the circle herself and tries to communicate with the astrologer. We see her say, I would like to speak to the person whose soul is attached to these cards. She says it like 2 or 3 times, and then finally they notice that there's a woman in black sitting in front of the fireplace in the room that they're in. Literally, no one noticed that she just appeared there, but yeah, they turn their heads, and there she is sitting there. Unfortunately, the astrologer gets up and then takes control, if you will. Doesn't possess the expert necessarily, but just kind of binds her body so that she can't move. And then suddenly we see the tarot cards start moving on their own, and we see 13 cards get pulled out. We see the 12 get put in the circle, and then 1 get put in the middle. And that's when the expert realizes, oh shit, the astrologer is doing my horoscope. And what's the 13th card that she gets? The 6 swords. 6 swords. And what ends up happening is the astrologer, in her very witchy, demonic-looking form, kind of pulls the expert out of the circle and into a dark room. The kids that are there at the house all start running around, trying to get out, trying to get the fuck out of there. They don't know what to do. I'm sorry, I skipped 2 kills that I actually did want to talk about. Put a pin in this scene. The 2 kills that I wanted to talk about, one was the magician, and this is Paige's death. Paige starts getting stalked by this very creepy looking guy. She ends up at some point on stage, almost like she's in a magic show, like she's the magician's assistant. Eventually, she runs away from the stage, finds a large trunk, and in all her infinite wisdom, she decides to hide in this fucking trunk. There's a keyhole big enough for her to look through, so of course, we get the very generic jump scare of the magician looking into the keyhole, freaking her out. Then we see the magician drag the box out back to the stage area with the girl still in it. The girl's trying to get out of the box, but the box has now been latched shut, so she can't get out. And then we see the magician, who's very creepy looking in his own right, by the way. I mean, he kind of looks like the Hatbox Ghost from the Haunted Mansion movies, more specifically the latest Haunted Mansion movie, the one where Jared Leto played the Hatbox Ghost. Anyway, point is, he pulls out this sword with serrated edges on it and starts poking the box with it. Of course, coming close to the girl, not actually hitting her, just kind of freaking her out. Eventually, we see the magician spin a crank on the stage, and what we see is the trunk start to shrink, literally with her in it, and it shrinks into the size of a coffin, so she literally has no way to hide. And then finally, that's when we see the magician do the classic saw a girl in half gag. He ends up sawing her in half, and of course, he actually saws her in half. And what's actually cool is that the audience is filled with like these ghostly looking characters, like people from the 17 and 1800s, you know, dressed in Victorian clothing and whatnot. The magician takes the top half of the box, the box that has the top half of the girl in it, and he turns it so that the opening is facing the audience. Unfortunately, the camera is on the opposite side, so we don't actually get to see the girl in 2 pieces, like the audience at the magic show gets to see it. Not an ultra gory or bloody kill. I just thought it was kind of cool and original and just a little bit different, at least for this movie. So I do want to give the movie its credit. And then the other one is Madeline's death. Oh, go ahead, Mike. I was
gonna say, yeah, that's the thing. It's like there are a few kills. Like I even thought the elevator sequence was like okay set up. It just did not have a satisfying conclusion. Exactly. Made worse even furthermore later in the movie, which you'll get to eventually. Yeah. But I wonder if it's just a victim of PG-13 where they're like, we can set up these kills, but we can't really finish them off the way we would if it was rated R. Because Yeah,
They're trying to get those younger. They're trying to get the younger audience in there. You know, they most horror studios know if you're putting out an original IP, a PG-13 is probably going to get a bigger audience than a rated R. You know, if it's an original, story that, it's not a sequel or a remake or whatever. So,
Yep.
I understand the business angle of it. I just don't understand the artistic angle because, ultimately it turns into a very lame, pointless movie because of it. So, yeah. Okay, and then the other kill I wanted to talk about is the rope kill, and this is the one on the bridge. This happens to, I believe it's Madeline. It's either Madeline or no, it's Madeline. It's definitely Madeline. Paige gets killed later. Anyway, Paige is the one in the magician's box. Madeline on the bridge. What ends up happening is there's like 5 of them left. It's like Paige, Madeline, Paxton, Haley, and Grant. Suddenly Grant's car stops working. It just stops, and they're stuck on this bridge. They realize. Now, another thing that I haven't kind of been skipping over is that throughout the movie, we get like audio cues of like the original horoscope so that while it's happening to them, we hear Haley's voice giving the original horoscope so that we see that everything that Haley predicted is actually coming true. Like for Paxton's death, she predicted ascending numbers, Paxton in an enclosed space, and something about sweet music playing. Well, to savvy movie watchers, that's an elevator. That's 100% an elevator. So at the point when Paxton gets in the elevator, I'm screaming at the screen, "What the fuck are you doing? You remember what your horoscope was. Why would you ever get in an elevator?" And then once he's in the elevator, that's when he realizes, oh shit, ascending numbers, enclosed space, sweet music. Ah, shit. So, yeah, that particular scene, it was, like Mike said, it was set up well, but it ends poorly, which, I haven't talked about yet. Anyway, the rope kill. Madeline ends up getting out of the car because part of her horoscope was that she always runs when she's scared, but that moving forward, she should try to face her fears and not run. Well, what does she do when the car stops working on the bridge? She gets out of the car and fucking runs like an idiot. Then we see the Hanged Man, the character of the Hanged Man, who's this kind of gangly, skinny, all CG character. This is one of the all CG ones. And we see him with a rope, and he's carrying a rope. Eventually, like I said, Madeline gets out of the car and starts running down the bridge. The Hanged Man catches up with her, drops the rope in front of her. So literally, like an idiot, she runs right into the noose when the noose wraps around her neck. And of course, the Hanged Man pulls her up and literally pulls her up into the darkness. Like you can't see her body. Eventually, when the rest of the group go to the spot and one of them asks, "Where's Madeline?" her body falls down and is hanging about, I don't know, like 6 or 7 feet up in the air. So, of course, they all freak out. They run away, which then this leads to our final 4 characters that are left: Paige, Haley, Paxton, and Grant. Paxton suddenly decides, you know what? I'm sick of this. I'm not following you guys anymore. When you guys want to start making sense again, give me a call. And he literally just ignores everything, the horoscope, all the warnings, and decides to go home. On his way home, of course, he starts getting stalked by the Fool, because that was the card that he got. That was his 13th card. And like I said, the Fool is just a very basic Harlequin like doll. Like it's as tall as a human, but it's so thin that I don't think a human could really play it, other than like a Doug Jones or a Javier Bodet or something. But he ends up stalking Paxton. The elevator doors will sometimes open and the Harlequin won't be there. Then they'll close, open again, he'll be there. It's literally a series of like 4 or 5 jump scares in a row, and all of them are stupider than the last. And yes, stupider is a word. When talking about this movie, stupider is a word. I'm sticking to that. Anyway, and then we finally all the lights go off in the elevator and something jumps out at Paxton, but then the scene goes black. We don't see basically what happens. Now, obviously, as the viewer, we assume that Paxton has been taken out because it's a PG-13 movie, so we're not going to see his death anyway. So at this point, Paige, Haley, and Grant are at the house, back at the mansion, getting the cards. And then, like I said, then we get the scene where Paige gets killed by the magician. So now we're down to just Haley and Grant. Eventually, throughout the course of them running around the house trying to get away from the astrologer, the expert's body falls from the ceiling, and she's got 6 swords buried in her back, just like the character on the card. So, of course, the expert's horoscope has now come to pass. So at this point, it's just Grant and Haley, the 2 people who were a couple but broke up right before the start of the movie. They start having their tender moment, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually Grant says something like, well, I guess we were cursed from the start. And then you see Haley start thinking, you see the gears in her head start to move, and she's like, cursed from the start. Wait a minute. So then she comes up with the idea of, why don't I just do a horoscope reading for the astrologer? Why don't I take the cards, just do a reading for her and turn the tables on her? And that's pretty much what ends up happening. Haley ends up grabbing the cards, putting the 13 cards out. She starts reading everything about the astrologer, how she's obviously in pain. She has a lot of rage inside of her. She needs to let go of that rage. And she ends up, and her 13th card is just the death card. We end up seeing the death card again for the second time in the movie. And one thing I will give them credit for is that they do explain all the different meanings behind the death card. The death card, as a lot of tarot experts would know, doesn't necessarily mean death. It could also mean change or the start of a new phase in your life. But they use the same stupid joke in this movie where they explain what the death card could mean, but then they go, but in this case, it just means death. I don't know. I guess that was meant to be their cool one-liner before the death of the astrologer, because after that, we see the astrologer grab Haley's neck. We see wind and some kind of supernatural force start spinning around the room. And then we see the astrologer actually start to break down, almost like she's deteriorating. And then we start getting flashes of like scenes from the past, from the astrologer's life, her reading the Count's stuff, her finding her daughter hanging in the woods, everything else. And Haley just says flat out, you need to let go. You need to forgive. And finally, the astrologer finally lets go. She completely dissipates into the nothingness, and everything calms down, and everything seems okay. Obviously, Haley and Grant are the last 2 left. They start to walk home because, I don't know, I guess the car that they brought there either isn't working. I mean, we don't actually get to see that, but whatever. But they're walking home. They realize that they've got at least a couple of more miles before they can get back into town to call the police and kind of let them know that there's dead bodies in that house that they just rented. Eventually, they see a car come down the road, and Grant remembers, I forget the exact part of his horoscope, but he remembers something about his horoscope, and the car actually scares them. At first, they think it's, just a motorist and that they could maybe get some help. But then they also realize that based on Grant's horoscope, it might actually be more danger. But as it turns out, it's fucking Paxton. Yeah, Paxton just shows up nonchalantly in his car, and we find out what happened at the end of the elevator scene. As it turns out, that final attack that we saw, that we thought was the Harlequin or the Joker attacking Paxton for the last time, was actually his fucking roommate walking into the elevator. Basically, we then, we flash back to the rest of that scene where we see Paxton on the ground like he just got attacked, but then the elevator doors open very normally, and it's his roommate standing there. So literally, he somehow escaped his horoscope. How? I don't know. I mean, this movie breaks its own rules constantly. Because Paxton was attacked well before they started to read the astrologer's horoscope. So there's no reason that Paxton should have survived. And why would the Joker stop attacking just because his roommate showed up? That also doesn't make sense to me. It's like the Joker is there. And I did forget to mention that we find out later in the movie that all the individual monsters in the movie are the astrologer. Basically, she is a shapeshifter, and she changes form to the future card that the victim ends up getting. So if they get the devil, like Grant, we'll actually see him getting stalked by a devil character, which we do see in the movie. Obviously, the devil never actually gets him. We see Grant start to get dragged into like a fiery like hole in the wall, and we see like all these demonic hands grabbing at him. But obviously, once the astrologer dissipates completely, that portal disappears, and suddenly Grant's okay. So, yay, happy ending. Grant and Haley and Paxton are all alive and driving home, and that's our movie, folks. I don't even think we got like a sting. We didn't even get like a sting at the end of the movie or anything.
Man, they basically stole the ending to Get Out when the friend just shows up.
Yes, thank you. That's what it reminded me so
of.
much in this movie. I mean, we've already talked about stuff like Cabin in the Woods and just all these different movies that they've borrowed from, and every movie that they borrowed from is better than this one. So just go back and watch those movies. Yeah, ultimately, this movie is just, there's nothing that I can really praise about it. When I say I like the creature design, I'm not saying that they're spectacular. They're not. They're very basic in general. I'm just saying that they're effective, and, you know, for what it is, they're well done. I'm not necessarily giving the movie a pass just because the creatures look cool, because this is a terrible movie regardless.
Yeah.
So
it's like it's basically saying in a movie where nothing stands out, hey, that's something we can point to and say, okay, decent job.
Yeah. That's the thing. I'm an eternal optimist, and I try to find the positive in everything. And ultimately, no matter how bad a movie is, I'll try to find something positive about it. And ultimately, the two kills that I highlighted, the magician and the rope, I did enjoy. And then, like I said, the creatures did look kind of cool. And the fact that they weren't all CG, some of them were actually human actors in suits, I'll commend them for that as well. But ultimately, that's all the positive I have for this movie. This movie is the sheer definition of forgettable. Like, I've already forgotten half of it, and I just finished talking about it. So, yeah, I would say avoid this movie unless if it hits streaming and you're just thoroughly bored. And since it is early enough in the year, this will probably hit streaming before the end of the year. So if you want to add to your numbers, I guess, you know, that's valid.
More than likely.
Yeah, that's valid.
End of the month is more likely. And if we're recording this on Sunday, it's the 5th. So I'm thinking in the end of the month.
I absolutely believe it. So yeah, like I said, folks, there's not much else I can say about this movie. With everything that we've said about it, go into it, you know, cautiously, but ultimately, like I said, and then there was a story that I actually did want to relate about my experience at the theater. Sitting right in front of me was an actual tarot card reader. And I know this because the guy was dressed like a ultimate gypsy. I mean, he was gypsied out. He even smelled like patchouli. I mean, he was an absolute gypsy. And he was also playing with a deck of tarot cards before the movie started. Like, while the trailers were playing, he was just kind of sitting there playing with a deck of tarot cards. Now, the reason I bring it up is because every time there was something that had to do specifically with tarot reading in the movie, he would laugh out loud and just say shit like, oh, that's so stupid. And folks, usually I hate when people talk during movies, but this guy was so fucking entertaining that I fucking loved it. He was pointing out all the foibles for this movie. And
probably the same thing my girlfriend would have pointed out.
Probably, yeah, absolutely. My wife too, more than likely. What's funny is that after the movie, in the hallway, he was doing a fucking tarot reading for somebody that was in the theater. I thought that was so cool. But yeah, just him, after the movie, he had a group of people around him where he just starts talking about all this shit that the movie did wrong. That, nope, that's not real. Nope, that's not real. Nope, you can't do that. Like, every rule that this movie broke when it came to astrology, horoscopes, zodiac signs, like all of it. So yeah, I just wanted to relay that because that even though this was a terrible movie, I had a great experience because of that one guy. So kudos, whoever you are.
All right. Yeah, I think that's going to wrap up our discussion on tarot. So that also wraps up the episode. So we're going to find out where else we can be heard, what's new, and all that stuff. So, Venom, do you have anything new since our last recording?
Honestly, I don't think I do. Creature Comforts episode 25 is still our latest episode with Godzilla vs. Kong. Look out for the next episode in the next couple of weeks. Definitely before the end of the month, we'll have a new episode out. We haven't chosen the movie yet, so I got nothing to really report there. Crystal Lake Gift Shop, still episode 4 is the latest episode. We're hoping to record the next episode soon because the next episode of the series is the season 1 Halloween episode, which I do remember enjoying. So I'm looking forward to doing that one sooner than later. And the main show, episode 59, is still our latest episode where we looked at my gory picks of Tokyo Gore Police and Adam Chaplin. Look out for the next episode of the main show in the coming weeks where we're going to continue the gore theme. Maybe not as gory, but we're still going to continue the gore theme going. So look out for that. That'll be the main show, episode 60. And that's about it. I have some guest spots coming up on the Joe Blow Horror Show and Journey with a Cinephile. But I'm not sure what movies I'm talking about yet, so I won't announce those quite yet. But those episodes probably won't be out till like June or July anyway. So I'll talk a little bit more about them once more information is solidified and once we actually record the episodes. So yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
All right, how about you, Dawn?
Yeah, I don't have much. Creature Comforts, we're still trying to figure out our next topic, but since it's early in the month and we should have everything out by the end of the month, no real guest spots to announce. Yeah, this is the off week of Horror Countdown, so I've got nothing new. So other than the last episode, which was top 10 Italian horror. So yeah, it's pretty much all on my end.
All right, cool. For me, I just have a spot I just did on Cut to the Chase with Dan and Lacey. We did The Howling and American Werewolf in London. It was kind of a versus episode. It wasn't so much going hardcore like which one is better. We kind of broke down ratings into like different categories, and for fun kind of like calculated the scores at the end to see which one got more points. And spoiler, it was close. I won't tell you which one won out, but yeah, it was a close finish. So if you're interested in that, I mean, it's two movies that have been talked about a lot before, but I thought the format we did it in was pretty cool. So check that out. And other than that, yeah, just the main show should be recording soon, and then more fresh cuts to come, pretty much on a weekly basis. So that's it. So with that said, we will go ahead and get out of here. Thanks everybody for listening to another episode of Fresh Cuts. We'll be back in about a week for another episode. Let's say bye to our listeners.
Later.
Astrology is fucking stupid. Study astronomy like a normal fucking scientist.
Yeah, next time someone asks if you want your tarot read, just say no.
Yeah, and stay out of doors that say keep out, you fucking idiots.
Yeah. It includes you, that those signs are talking to you. So.
Yep.